Coming to you from the Trumbull Insurance Agency virtual studio. This is a Kirby on Sports podcast production on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. Turn your stress and anxiety into peace and security with Trumbull Insurance. Contact Patrick Bankemper at 540-532-0622 or drop him an email, patrick@trumbullagency.com, for all your insurance needs. For our sponsors, Regroup Building Services, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, and Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate, we bring you a very fun interview. I'm glad we were finally able to make this work. But before we begin, our co-host and lead contributor, Dan Demski, has joined us. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. I'm very excited to be here and to get to know our very special guest today and discuss his book. It's a really, really well-written book for sure.
Absolutely. So our special guest, a freelance writer, the author of the book From Hangtime to Primetime. It's basically a timeline of how the NBA got to where it is today, in my opinion. From Ithaca, New York, it's Pete Croatto. Pete, thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate
very happy to have you. Yeah.
I'm happy we're finally able to get this done. This has been months in the making, I think.
Yes.
which for a meatball like me is very unusual. I'm not usually I'm not. That's usually months is like when you get someone like Susan Orlean in the studio. So really pleased to be here.
Well, that was basically on me because the podcast, it's just in a busy season. But
that's fine.
With the NBA kicking off and your book based about the NBA, what a perfect time to get on, Pete, and talking about this. So first and foremost, you're a freelance writer based outside of Ithaca, New York. Your writing has appeared in many outlets, including Slam, the New York Times, GQ, the AV, Grantland, Shondaland, in Sports Illustrated. Your first book, From Hangtime to Primetime, it came out December of 2020. So, Pete, let's kick off the round of questions with the first thing I want to know. Publishing a book during the pandemic, that must have been very interesting. I'm sure it could have been sort of challenging. Take us through what that was like, COVID-19, and the effect it had on writing your book.
I was very lucky. Most of the writing of the book had been completed before, it's funny, this has gone on for so long now. I actually forgot when the pandemic actually started. So we're looking at mid-March of 2020. By that time, I had filed sort of my most of the book had been written. So I was in really good shape. It was just the problem that I had was really just like everyone else, sort of trying to get into a normal work schedule while balancing family, balancing just the uncertainty of everything that was going on, and trying to, get my first book out the door. I mean, that was a lot. That was probably the hardest part of it. But I was lucky compared to other people who released their book, who either released the book right when the pandemic started, when you couldn't go into stores, when no one knew what was happening, or people who were writing it in the middle of a pandemic when they probably didn't know which way was up. It's in terms of the promotion, it's funny. I didn't really notice much of a difference because as a freelance writer, I'm always pitching stories to people. I'm always pitching things. So this really pitching the book felt very much the same, like pitching an article. And luckily for me, Zoom was already well established by then, and we're talking over Zoom now. A lot of outlets and public, bookstores and libraries were adapting to these virtual meetings, these virtual hangouts. So there wasn't the chaos in promoting the book or getting the word out there that I feared. I think every writer who released a book in the early to mid days of the pandemic, and even now, are worried about reception. And so, yeah, it's a concern, but I don't know. I am somebody who, it took me years to write this book. It took me years to get a book out. As I've said repeatedly, I'm 44. I'm not a spring chicken, just to use an old phrase in this business. So just getting the book out there and getting people to read it and getting coverage, that was a victory. So would things have been better if there hadn't been a pandemic? Probably. But you know what? This is my first time around, and I was just thrilled to A, have a book out, and B, to have it covered and talked about in some places. So yeah, I mean, everything after the book coming out was gravy in my opinion.
That's very good to hear. So yeah, my next question, I'm very interested in, this has nothing to do with sports or anything, but
okay.
What's it like being an author and publishing a book? Because it's just been something in the back of my mind that I've always just could not comprehend, how you just go about writing books and it just ends up on a shelf in a store. I know it must be a much more complex system, but tell me what it was like for you as an author going about publishing a book.
I mean, that's yeah. I mean, I had the same thought. Like, publishing a book for me was, for many years, was like going to Narnia. It's like, well, that's not going to happen. It's so out of the ordinary that it just seemed ridiculous to give it much thought. But that's a really good question, and it's hard to give a simple answer to that. Like, because everyone's different. I don't think any one author has. I don't think there's a uniform path to publishing a book. I honestly don't. I think every author has a different experience, different circumstances, so I think if you talk to 15, 20, 100 authors, they'll give you different stories. I mean, how it came about for me was really just, I think, luck and timing and just sheer determination, to be honest with you. I mean, it started when I wrote a piece for Grantland in 2013 on Marvin Gaye's national anthem at the '83 All-Star Game, which is in the book. And in writing that piece, I thought, there's a lot here. There's a lot about this anthem and what it represents about the NBA's past and its future that I couldn't get into the article. And to me, that anthem represented the turning point of the NBA from when it turned into a cool league, into a league that was going to try something new and different, that wasn't going to kowtow to what middle America wanted. That's very hard to put in an article. So at that point, I thought, well, there might be a book here. And when a couple of other people said likewise, I kind of started to work on pitch stories that tied into the book's timeline. So I wrote a story about the first slam dunk contest in 1984. I wrote about, trying to think what else. I wrote about Salem Sportswear, which is a big part of the NBA's apparel in the early days. And those pieces kind of got me, those pieces got me a little closer to the narrative that I wanted to put together. And then I was very lucky to have friends that gave me advice on how to write a proposal. But a proposal basically is essentially an extended outline of how you're going to write the book. It outlines the chapters. It outlines comparable titles. There are a couple of sample chapters in there. So I had a couple of friends who helped me with that. And then, one of them, my friend Mark Rotella, introduced me to his agent. That didn't go so well, but it gave me confidence that this was something I could sell and pitch to places. And then I got very lucky. In 2017, I became a member of the American Society of Journalists and Authors, which is an association for journalists. It provides networking opportunities, counsel. It's a trade organization. And every year, ASJA holds a conference in New York City where you can talk to agents. So when I found out about that, I thought I have to get to this conference. I have to be prepared and have my proposal ready and a pitch ready for agents. And that's what I did. And I met with about 4 or 5 agents. And thankfully one of them bit when I was at the conference. And so, yeah, I mean, but it was a very long process. So 2013, I wrote the story, and 2020, the book came out. So that's a long process, and it doesn't happen. I mean, so that's what people will ask me like, oh, I want to write a book, or I want to do this and I want to do that. And the first thing I tell them is it takes time.
Right.
Like there are some people who are very lucky and they get lightning in a bottle and they're able to get an agent, get published, and it all happens very quickly. And that's great. I do not hate on those people for anything. That's good for them. They earned it. But for a lot of writers, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort to get from the beginning to get from the start to the finish. And that happened to me. So but it never felt like that much work to me because I loved everything I was doing. I loved the writing the writing I was doing that supported this book. I love the topic. So that kind of kept me going year after year after year.
How would you say your day-to-day life was changed when you started writing this book? You mentioned that obviously it didn't feel like work or anything like that. Were you able to do, still write freelance stuff all the time as often as you did while you were writing the book, or how did that change? And how did were you a lot more busy?
No, I'm glad you asked me that question because it's a really good question. And I think there's this assumption that, you get an advance and like you're on easy street and you can just I can just write. Doesn't work that way. The way that I got a nice advance for the book. It was a good advance, but it wasn't going to last me very long. So right. There were a couple of gigs that I kept, monthly gigs that were going to be guaranteed money. They were going to bring in guaranteed money a month. It wasn't going to be much, but it was going to be something. And what I did was I took the advance that I got, I took out money for taxes. My agent got a cut. I put that money aside and I took out a monthly stipend, which served as my salary. And I wrote I took the money out each month to keep me afloat. There are a couple of problems with that. I ran out of money because, things happen like the car needs repairs, exactly. Your kid gets sick, things come up, and that I dipped into the money a little sooner than I wanted to. So I ran out of money and I had to borrow some money. I paid it back from my parents. So that was good. So thanks, Mom and Dad. But yeah, I mean, I had to, but looking back, I would have tried to have more gigs to keep me afloat as I wrote this book. But the problem with this is that, and I think for me at least, I need to be all in on this book because it's a large period of time. I had to talk to a lot of people. I had to read a shit ton of books, a lot of articles. I needed every minute I could. So basically I was writing like 7 days, reading, researching and reporting 6-7 days a week. And then did that for 12 months. Wow. 11 months, 12 months. And then wrote the book in 5 months. So it was very compressed and it was very tight. But yeah, I mean, looking back, I would have had more money set aside and I probably would have had 1 or 2 more easy gigs that could have brought in reliable income. But part of it was, a big problem I had with that was A, I didn't have those clients, and B, I wanted this book to be as good as it could possibly be. And I knew that to do that, I had to go all in. I had to devote as much time as I could in my working hours to make the book great. And I don't regret it. But but the next time I do this, will I do things differently? Yeah, I think I will. Because the thing is, as I get older, one thing I've realized is that, whether it's a book or a magazine piece or whatever, it's all kind of in the same bucket. Like it's I'm thrilled to have written a book, but at the end of the day, it's just another writing assignment. And I think next time, I think the intimidation factor won't be there. It won't seem so new. So I'll be able. I think I'll be able to treat it more like another assignment. Like, okay, well, for these 4 hours, I'm going to work on this, and then I'll write this column, or I'll do this copy editing gig, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, but it was my first time, so I kind of just I pushed all the chips in and let it ride. And thankfully, I still have a house. My wife hasn't left me. I'm still gainfully employed by my clients, so it worked out okay.
Those are the most important things. That's what it's all about at the end of the day,
Absolutely, yeah.
Got to take care of the family.
And that's the key too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the background behind this book. How long has the NBA been a passion of yours, and especially like the history of the NBA? Would you say, you grew up a fan, and that's kind of how you got? I mean, you got the idea originally to sort of talk about how the NBA came, from the mid '70s up to where it is now, to the entertainment, venture that it's become now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been. Oh yeah, I mean, I've been a fan. I've been an NBA fan for, let's see, over 30 years. So I started getting to basketball because I was a tall kid. When I was 13, I was like, I shot up to like 5'8", 5'9", and everyone was like, "Oh, do you play basketball?" And I thought, well, let me give it a try. And so I started to play pickup and started to fool around with that. And then I got into it was also right around the time when Michael Jordan was just a demigod. So he was the must see attraction. So it was just so I was lucky in that regard. Jordan was sort of this matinee idol that everyone kind of gravitated to, and he was amazing. And then as time went on, a year or two later, I really got into the Knicks. MSG Network was my cable station of choice, and got into the Knicks and Patrick Ewing and John Starks and those guys. But I think what really kind of tied everything together was right around the time I got into the NBA. NBA Inside Stuff premiered, which I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was this show that came on NBC Saturday mornings, 11 o'clock where I lived. It was Willow Bay and Ahmad Rashad, and for half an hour every Saturday, they would just go through the week, and they'd have features on players and highlights. And for a kid in the 90s, and again, this is well before internet, like you maybe had the newspaper and ESPN and whatever cable system you had to kind of satiate you. NBA Inside Stuff was just manna from heaven. So like those 3 or 4 things combined to turn me into a basketball fan. And then, as I became a basketball fan, I kind of followed the same path with the NBA that I did with baseball, which I was a fan of before. I just started to read whatever I could find. So, I'd go to my library and I'd check out, this book on the Knicks, or this book on this player, or read Xander Hollander complete handbooks, which were these season guides that were just great. So it just kind of built from there. And then, as I got older and became more of a reader and got into writing, I started reading, if you see behind me, I have a ton of basketball books and just general books here. It kind of just blossomed. But as I got into sports writing, I never stopped being a fan. And even today, I'm still a fan. And I think I have the curiosity of a fan, the curiosity of somebody who just has kind of an outside view. And that, that kept me going, not only with the stories that I wrote, but with the book. And also from this point on, I mean, I have stories now that I'm writing that have come about because I'm just a fan who geeks out on this stuff like everybody else.
Passion's number one for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, Pete, you wrote an article about that in Shondaland, correct?
Yeah.
About
Willow Bay, yeah.
Inside stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
I did.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I gave that a read. That's a really good article. So go check that out.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, that was it's so funny. Like a few times, and you guys will have this, I'm sure, down the road. Like you'll talk to people who built that were influences during your formative years.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I interviewed Willow Bay was a big, like, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but like Willow Bay and Ahmad Rashad, when I was 13, 14, 15, they were central figures of those times. And so there's always this feeling, you talk to somebody who played that role, that they're going to just be unlikable or just like insufferable. So you're always, I'm so like, but Willow Bay was just, she was great. She was just the nicest, smartest, just sharp as a tack. Like just the kind of person that like, if I ran into her at a party or like, picking up my kid, like I would just talk to her and just walk away being like, wow, that was amazing. And she was
awesome.
great. So like, yeah, it's, I've had a few times where it's gone the other way, but thankfully,
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, but with Willow Bay, it worked out well back on wood. So,
well, that's always a nice thing when they exceed your expectations.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the one thing that I think, if I had to give any young journalist advice is that you're going to have those experiences where you meet somebody whose work you admire or who you grew up with or whose album you like or who's great in a show or whatever, and they just turn out to be
terrible.
Yeah, and that's happened, and it's not fun when it happens, but it's that's life, unfortunately.
Very, very true.
So Pete, I'd like to go back. You said you do freelance writing. Is there like any limits on what you do in terms of freelance writing? Like, do you write can you write for papers? I mean, give me a better understanding about what certain things you're into when you're freelance writing.
Oh yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad you guys are asking me this because I think people will look at freelance writer and be like, "What the hell does that mean?" And I mean, I put that down because I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a freelance writer, I've met a lot of great people who they are just self-consciously freelance writers. That's what they do and they love it. So I'm very happy to explain it. Yeah, I mean, for me, and everyone's different. So with me as a freelance writer, I really, I do have steady clients that I work for either daily or regularly. For example, every morning there's a magazine that I copy edit for, and I do that for 4 or 5 hours a day. It's very good pay, and it also allows me the time to send out pitches or to do things that kind of that can kind of propel things forward on the other end. Like for example, make phone calls or the little administrative things that kind of get in everyone's hair. So that's one client that I have. I also have clients that will come to me. For example, college alumni magazines will come to me a lot. I have a few clients there that will say, hey, we have a profile on this student or this alumni. Can you write something? But a lot of the stuff that I do is just, I'll have an idea and I'll pitch it. Or for example, let me look at my big board here because I always have something.
Got a big board.
Yeah, the big board.
That's awesome.
I put this up about 5 years ago, and it just keeps everything in front of me here. So, for example, I'm looking here. Okay, so yeah, I pitched an article to Fox Sports about. I won't tell you guys too much about it because I don't want to give away the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
that deals with NBA coaches. So that was something that I pitched and they accepted. So I'm working on that now. So I have a nice balance of clients of writing assignments that come from pre-established relationships. So the copying gig is a pre-established relationship. I have the 3 or 4 college alumni publications that I write for are pre-established or established. The same goes for trade magazines. Before I started my current career, I spent 3.5 years writing for trade magazines in natural products, so supplements, things like that. So I still do writing for a lot. A lot of my writing, pardon me, comes from that. So, and then maybe about half of it, the rest comes from just pitching. So the Shondaland piece that you referenced just now, Dan, that was a pitch where I wrote an editor, said, hey, I'd love to do something about NBA Inside Stuff's 30th anniversary. What about Willow Bay? Great. A lot of the pieces that I've written that you mentioned in the intro, Josh, like those were ideas that I approached an editor with. So like everything with the New York Times was me approaching an editor.
That's really cool.
I've done stuff for Men's Journal. Like I interviewed Chris Bosch. That was that was me approaching an editor. So but you know what? Like some people might think like, geez, that sounds awful. But like, I love it. Like I love trying to convince somebody that my idea has merit and would be a great fit for what they do. and sell it. I don't know what it is. I like the variety of it, and I like the I like the fact that I can change the pace. If I don't have to just write about sports or pop culture or whatever. I can mix it up. So yeah. So really, I mean, that's what I mean. And so each day is a little bit different, you know, like for example, today, I don't know if I'm going into too much detail here. If I am, please stop me.
Oh no, go.
You're great. You're great.
No,
doing a great job.
So today I did my comp editing gig, and then I sent a pitch to Men's Journal about a possible acting interview. Then I sent another pitch to the Washington Post for a sports story that I think they might want, because I have a contact there that I've established a decent rapport with. And then I'm working with a company I'm working with a client about possibly doing a regular column for a sports site. So I'm trying to work on getting this column placed, you know, at a high profile outlet. So, and then after that, you know, it's just following up on pitches, on ideas that I'd sent to people's way, and you know, doing interviews for this book, which is taking up more and more time, knock on wood. And yeah, and then tomorrow will be something different. Like tomorrow I'll watch a movie with Danny Glover because I'm preparing for an interview with him.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
So every day is different, which is what I love about this job. And you know, it's some days are slow, some days are busy, but I don't know. I have a nice, well-rounded life. Like I was able to go food shopping today because we had nothing in the house. So like that was great. Just ran out at 3:00, went food shopping, picked up my daughter, and here I am now. So yeah, it's a very for someone who's married to someone who's a very busy job. We have a daughter who's 4, she'll be 5 in November. Having a job like this where I can kind of set my own hours and set my own pace really does wonders for the whole work-life balance. So I love what I do, love it to pieces.
Hey, November birthdays represent out here.
How many? What you got? What? But my dad's a November birthday.
I'm a November birthday.
My daughter's November 18th. And
no kidding.
Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else is a November birthday in my family. I'm probably gonna forget somebody. Not my wife. It's not my wife. So that's good. So I'm clear on that. So everyone else is
that's
good
the one
go.
You gotta remember.
Yeah, you cannot forget that. You can't whiff on that. If you do, it's you know what it is. It's not just the cliched stand-up comedy thing. It's just, you know, being a decent human being and remembering the person you love the most in your life, their birthday. Like, you know, you should like, if you're a sentient human being, you should remember your mom's birthday, your dad's birthday, your spouse's birthday, your children's birthday, and
absolutely
your sibling's birthday. Like that, those are the minimum requirements. Everyone else,
friends are you know, up in the air.
Yeah, I do know some of my friends' birthdays. I know a couple of them, but like, yeah, if you put a gun to my head, I'm not going to remember all of them. So
that's when those notifications are nice. You know, it's so and so's birthday. It's like
that's the one use of Facebook when they're not mining data. That Facebook is good for remembering anniversaries of loved ones and friends. It's like, oh yeah, it's my brother's wedding anniversary today. I'll gotta send a text or make a phone call.
So Pete, going back to the freelance writing side of things, like for example, I'm big into the sports writing kind of. I like reading columns and articles from certain people. Like, would it ever be out of the question, hypothetically, if like somebody asked you, or if you've done this already, have you ever like covered a sporting event and wrote a recap about it afterwards, stuff like that? Or is it more interview based and like doing columns like you were discussing earlier?
You know, I've never been a sports beat reporter. I've never, and again, like, this is not to denigrate beat reporting or sports writers or columnists. It's just something I never really had an interest in. And I'll tell you why. Because I worked in newspapers, and, you know, I worked, you know, I knew people in the sports departments there. And I also worked closely with, because just physically, you know, your desk is here, the sports department's there. I don't know why I'm pointing. It's like anyone can see the layout of what I'm referring to. But like, but with sports reporters at the papers that I worked for, they never looked happy. Like the sports reporters there never looked like they were like they always worked weekends. The hours were brutal. It just didn't seem like a job that I really wanted to pursue full time. And I also didn't really want to know how the sausage got made.
Right.
What clinched it for me was when I was in college a billion years ago. I read a book about the 1992 New York Mets called "The Worst Team Money Could Buy" by Bob Klapsich and John Halper, who were beat reporters for two of the major New York dailies, and they covered the '92 Mets, which was that's a team with Vince Coleman and Bobby Bonilla. Like, it's just a dysfunctional mess of a team. And reading that book made me realize, like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with sports reporting, because like the amount of time you have to put in, like chasing players, writing the recap, doing a sidebar, getting a Sunday column. I read that, I was like, I have no interest in that. It just doesn't sound like my cup of tea. And so, yeah, I mean, I got into sports writing almost by accident. Because when I started freelancing, I needed places to write, and there seemed to be a lot of sports websites and publications that needed sports reporting. So it just sort of kind of fell into it more than anything else. But I never really dreamt of when I was in high school and college, like writing for being like the sports columnist for the New York Times, or for I don't know, being on ESPN. I wanted to be a movie reviewer, that worked out terribly. So yeah, I got into this by accident, and I really don't regret it. Not one moment. I've loved it.
So Pete, going back to the book, From Hangtime to Primetime, once again, a really great read. You said you started in 2015 and it came out in 2020, correct?
2013 is when I wrote the article for Grantland, and then the book came out in 2020. So I started writing the article for Grantland in 2012. So 8 years between like the article, writing that, getting the idea, and then the book coming out. So yeah, about 8 years.
Wow. So in that 8-year time span that it took to get From Hangtime to Primetime out on the shelves in stores, wherever you can purchase it, give me the process on like what information you gathered, what you had to study, what you had to research in order to make this book what it is today.
Okay, that's a great question. So I mean, to start off with, when I pitched this thing to Grantland, I had no real like sports writing experience. I mean, I'd written a piece for the old Deadspin, and I had done I'd written a book review column on sports books for a now defunct website called Bibliobuffet, which is a wonderful site that just got shuttered. But yeah, like, I didn't have like a pool. I wasn't like Woj or Shams. Like, I didn't have like a Rolodex full of names that I could call and just get like the skinny on what happened in 1983. Like, I had to kind of just like work from scratch, which looking back now just seems ridiculous. Like, I have no idea how I made that work. But anyway, so yeah, in that time, what was really important to me was to kind of show that I had the background to write a book like this. So really, it kind of worked out for the better for a couple of reasons. First, between 2013 and I guess the proposal looks like 2018, I was able to write for Slam, for Hoop, for Grantland, for Philadelphia Magazine, the Times, like all these places where an editor could look at the proposal and be like, oh yeah, like this guy actually has chops. Like, he's written for places with that are read widely. That he's not just writing for like a blog. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like a blog or just like tweeting stuff. Like, I actually had a body of work that someone could say like, oh yeah, like he knows what he's doing. He's written for places where there's meat on the bone. What was also important about those places is every time I wrote a story, so whether it was Marvin Gaye or Salem Sportswear, or in the case of or the Times, there were contacts that I made along the way. So, and those contacts were all people that I went to for the book. So I was able to go back to Bill Fickett of Salem Sportswear after, when I was writing the book, because I talked about Rolling Stone and Bill Marshall, same thing. The fact that I had this body of work and sources that dealt with me, and they knew that I was going to spell their name right, and I wasn't going to, screw up what they wrote, that I was going to be fair but tough, that helped. Because I can then go to those names and be like, hey, you know what, like, can you help me out here? I'm writing this book. But during that time, like, I thought about being a fan. All that time I'm reading, and I'm reading other books, and I'm trying to, if not get bits and pieces to help my book, I'm also learning about style, about how to write, what not to write, how to write, how not to write. Like, for a long time, I was reviewing books for a couple of trade magazines, sports books, and a lot of them were terrible. But what I learned how not to write something, and the stuff that came in that was really good. That made me think, oh wow, I should do it this way, or hey, I can take this risk, I can tell the story this way instead of that way. So really, it was almost like going to journalism school again to kind of learn like the ins and outs of how to write a book by reviewing all these books and reviewing. But reviewing all those terrible books also gave me hope, because I thought, well, if this schmuck can write a book and
I can do better.
He or she is getting a deal. Well, I can do that. I can, why not me? So really during that time, it was almost those 5 years. It was perfect because it put me in the right position to write this book, because A, I was reading as much as I could. B, I was working on stories that was getting me closer to the book and made me more of an authority, for better or for worse. And also got me closer to sources who were important. And C, like, it built my body of work. It was all. I mean, those 5 years, more than 5 years, excuse me. 2013 to, seems like 8 years. 2013 to 2018, those are really big years, because it helped me, made me better as a writer, made me better as a reporter, and it also kind of it gave me bona fides, which I didn't really have before. So yeah, I mean, if I had gone to a publisher and said like, hey, here's what I have, if I had done that in 2013, I would have been laughed out of the room. But going in 2018, it was a big difference. I put some miles on the tires, as they say.
You had credibility, and
absolutely, and that's
a great background.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, but again, here's the thing too. Then I hope this comes across. Like, at no point did I ever think like, oh, geez, I'm wasting my time. Like, I had fun doing this stuff. Like, it was fun to talk to Bill Walton. Like, it was fun to talk to Bernard King about his book. Like, it was fun to, to write about like goofy basketball cards. Like, all those things were fun to me, and it helped that I got paid. But I never thought of it as work, or as, well, if I don't nail these and make it to the mountaintop, it's all a waste of time. Even if I hadn't written the book, it was never a waste of time, because I had fun. I learned a lot. I met a lot of interesting people who I wouldn't have met otherwise. So really, the book was just gravy. Everything that came from the book, that I did before the book, I should say, that was the good stuff. That was the fun stuff.
Yeah, I want to ask you about one of the prominent figures in your book, Commissioner David Stern, who has one of the most interesting legacies as far as commissioners are concerned. But he is definitely credited for bringing the game internationally and also helping change its image in the late 70s and 80s. You wrote a section about how he took I think it was someone from Campbell's Soup to a game, and there was a fight that broke out or something.
Yeah.
That's not good. That's not a good show of your product at all.
No, that was Mike Suskovich, who was in NBA Properties, took a Campbell Soup executive to game, I think it's game 3 of the 77 finals with the Blazers and the Sixers. And that's, if for basketball fans out there, that's the infamous game where Daryl Dawkins and Maurice Lucas went at it. And Maurice Lucas just beat the crap out of Daryl Dawkins, and Lucas got ejected, and Daryl Dawkins just completely tore up the Sixers bathroom. and just like ripped out urinals and sinks and just went bananas.
Oh my God.
And and Mike Suskovich, who was doing the schmoozing, took this Campbell soup exec to the game and took him to the locker room afterwards.
Oh no.
And the executive said, like, Mike, this is great, because he's a basketball fan. He's like enjoying just like what he sees. But we can't pitch, like, we're a family product. We can't pitch this. But David Stern was as you said, was a big part in turning that ship around. And he's a key figure in the book for sure. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you think he's the most important person, as far as if you could like name one person who helped expand the NBA to what it is now? I mean, I would think David Stern's probably up there, but I mean, who in your mind is that central character if you could pick just one person?
I think it's David Stern. I mean, I and this is not to diminish the contributions of the other people in the book or the other people in the NBA's history, because it's just, honestly, it is a long list. I mean, David Stern is sort of to use an example, I may date myself because all my movie references are before like 2015, but like if you look, like, David Stern to me is kind of like George Clooney in the Ocean's 11 trilogy.
Okay.
Like, he's sort of the ringleader. He's the guy who has all the ideas, and he has a whole bunch of people that are capable and smart who can carry those ideas out. So David Stern to me is sort of like the Danny Ocean, Brad Pitt, depending on what mood I'm in, part of Ocean's 11. But yeah, I think David Stern is the key figure in this book. He's the key character for sure. Because I think not only did he do so much, but he was also the rallying point for all the people in the NBA. I mean, they drew energy from him because he was such an evangelist for what the league could become. So David Stern, he's I think the key figure, and I wish I could have talked to the man, but it just didn't happen for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, that was a shame. He left us. I guess that was, what was that, 2 years ago now? It's really hard to remember.
Yeah, it was December. It was I think he died January 1st, 2020. And I had actually emailed. I'd emailed. So I'd gotten his work email from a couple of sources, and I'd written to him like weekly for like months, like, hey, like, you don't want to talk to me? Let's talk. Let's chat. Like, it was just relentless. And if I were him, I would have blocked my email. But I figured, like, there's nothing to lose. Like, he's not curing cancer. So
absolutely. Yeah.
About 6 weeks before he died, I wrote one last time saying, like, hey, I'm putting this book to bed. If you want to talk to me, I'd love to talk to you. I've talked to 300 plus people for this book. I feel like, I want to make sure that you get a chance if you want a chance to talk. And I even joked saying, like, look, if you want to talk to my parents about why I'm such a pain in the ass, like, go ahead. Like, you can call them. They're retired. They got nothing to do. And he wrote back to me. He said, look, I appreciate the offer, and you don't have to give me your parents' email address. I wish you nothing but luck with the project. And to David Stern's credit, he didn't prevent anyone from talking to me. He didn't, I think I'm pretty well connected with the book's circle of contacts, and no one ever told me, like, yeah, David told me not to talk to you, or yeah, I can't talk because David's gonna, like, he didn't
like
stand in anyone's way.
Yeah.
Well, he does kind of have that allure.
Yeah.
Of, like, he's kind of like the bad, to use the Pulp Fiction phrase, like the bad motherfucker. Like, he's somebody who you didn't want to piss off. You didn't want to make unhappy, but at the same time, he was almost like everyone's dad.
Right.
And it's a very weird dichotomy and a very delicate dichotomy. But to his credit, he never told anyone, yeah, don't talk to this guy, or like, yeah, I don't want this guy covering anything. I mean, I talked to a lot of people in his inner circle who he worked with for years, and they were all very forthcoming, and they were very honest about their relationship with David Stern, because he could be a tough guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about all these people and connections you have in when writing this book, Pete. I mean, talk about how important it is to network and make connections in your field of work.
Oh, it's usually important. You can't. I mean, I don't know how other journalists do it, other reporters do it, other writers do it, but you can't be a lone wolf in this business. You have to be able to talk to people, and you have to be able to gain their trust, and you have to be able to be humane about it. So, yeah, I mean, it was very important to me to network is hugely important. But not only that, but just to be forthright with people and to be genuine. Mm-hmm. I don't think, nobody wants to deal with someone whose agenda is naked for the world to see. Like if I called, I don't know, Julia, if I called, I'm trying to think, Phil Knight, and just made it very clear what my angle was, and and made it sound like I wanted to just talk to him, wanted to use him as a notch on my ladder. That is not a very flattering position for someone to be in. So I try to be as, I try to be genuine throughout this whole thing. And even now with networking is especially important to me as a writer, because, if I need an editor's contact information, I can talk to this person. And if someone needs a favor in return, I'm happy to extend it. Networking is absolutely huge in this business. I think it's huge in any business. I mean, you can't be a lone wolf. Maybe unless you're a hitman or, you're I don't know, what are other solitary professions at this juncture? I have no idea.
There's not much.
But I mean, you've got to be, I don't know. Being a human being goes a long way, and saying please and thank you, and just again, being genuine, being curious. Like, I don't know. You have to be human and be yourself when you're dealing with people, dealing with strangers, because they don't know you. Like, nobody owes you anything. Like, Julius Erving didn't need to talk to me. George Gervin didn't need to talk to me. Phil Knight didn't need to talk to me. So, so when you're in that situation, you're thankful for their time, and you want to treat them like a person, and you want to ask them questions that they haven't heard 1,000 times, and you want to try to get to the root to the person, not as, oh, I'm talking to this famous person or this executive. And the same set of rules applies when you're when in my field or in any field. Like, you have to be first and foremost a decent human being, and I think that goes a long way with a lot of things.
So, Pete, I want to discuss. I don't want to spoil a lot of the book or anything, because I want people to go out and read this work of art right here. So,
thank you.
But in chapter 10, you talked about the NBA in China. So I want to get your thoughts on what it was like for the NBA to go to China, and how did it affect the global impact of basketball?
Well, I think I'm trying to remember the part you're referring to. The China part was very much part of a lark. I think it was something that was done. Who was it? One of the Fleischer boys. I think it was Mark Fleischer. Was a producer, or rather, no, I'm sorry, he was an agent. He worked with his father, Larry Fleischer. And every year, Larry Fleischer would have these tours where he'd take his clients, who were a lot of high-profile clients like Bob Lanier, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, wide array, and they would just go on these international tours. And one year they played in China, and Mark Fleischer was able to arrange to have the game televised on ESPN. I think this is in 82 or 83. It's very early. But what that tour did was a couple of things. So it's kind of a footnote now. It showed that there was competition internationally, because when I talked to Mark Fleischer for the book, he said the Chinese players didn't miss. They were on fire most of the games, and the games were competitive. The NBA players kind of walked in oh yeah, we're just gonna, get some souvenirs and see the Great Wall of China and, party a little bit. the Chinese players went out to play. Like they were legitimately like stoked to play this game. And it kind of was a harbinger of things to come, because the NBA was a very portable game. And that was because of NBA videos making the rounds that would be shared among friends. Like Vlade Divac told me of, among his teammates, there was a tape that would just circulate like around his teammates. It would just go throughout Yugoslavia of people like playing the same videotape. So the game, had international roots early. And it was, there were tours in the 1950s with Bill Russell and Bob Cousy, into the 60s with Oscar Robertson, Wayne Embry, a lot of players from that time. And, the Fleischers kind of grew that in the 70s and 80s. But where it really took off was with the McDonald's Open in 1987, which took place in Milwaukee, but had, 3 international teams coming, including Real Madrid, and I think the Russian national team. And that was really a showcase for the game, for the NBA game, but also it also allowed the NBA game to go to places where it wasn't normally going to go. So that meant Europe, that meant the Soviet Union, that meant, places that maybe people didn't get the NBA product. So that planted the seed of international basketball, for sure. But that had been, but as you alluded to, Josh, like that had been done earlier. There had been other small gestures that led to this big gesture, which was McDonald's Open. And I think that's kind of like to me, that kind of symbolizes pretty much all sports, right? Like we watch something now and we think, oh my God, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And we think that's new, or we think that's special. Well, there's usually a precedent for it. Or if there's not a precedent, there have been steps in place for this thing to occur. So I don't know if you guys are hoop fans, obviously. Like I like Giannis Antetokounmpo a lot. I think he's a great player. I got the pronunciation on the second time. But his game, if you talk to old hoops fans, like they'll tell you, like, yeah, his game reminds me of Connie Hawkins, like the same kind of like long glides and the gracefulness and the way that he builds, that he bends his body, or Chris Paul, dribbling the ball up the court. Like, there's a whole legion of old school point guards that he is representing. Everyone from like, Dennis Johnson, a Tiny Archibald, to Oscar Robertson. Like there's history in the present. And so everything that you see in any sport, I believe, has a precedent. Pardon. There we go. And it can either be minute or it can be obvious. So I think that's kind of, an international basketball is a perfect example of that, because that had been done for years before we got to Yao Ming, and before we got to Manu Bol and all these great international players.
So I want to like step away from that for a sec, and before we talk NBA and I believe wrap up,
sure,
I want to ask you about how you got involved with the Writer magazine, and what advice would you give to freelance journalists or people who want to get into the freelance journalist field?
Oh man, I got involved with the Writer magazine. I pitched them blind. I had an essay that I wanted to write, and I just sent them the essay, and they said, "Oh, great! Like, yeah, we'll publish this." And then I kept pitching, kept writing for them, and after maybe a year or two, I said, "Hey, you know what? Like, your freelance success column, why don't you have me write it? I'll just do it every month, and that way you don't have to worry about it. I'll learn something. Readers will learn something."
It's awesome.
And my editor at the time, Nikki Porter, said, "Yeah, great, we'll do that." So I did that for a few years. I stopped with the Writer magazine about a year ago, because for a couple of reasons. First, I was running out of things to say. I felt that I was starting to repeat myself, and I felt I really wasn't giving the job the full attention that it deserved. So I stepped away. And the second thing was there were some internal issues, specifically with payment and other machinations, as I'll say, that kind of made me a little bitter. So I thought, let me just step away. I've given this a good run.
Right.
I'm going to step back and do something else. My advice for freelance writers, it's a good question. I have a couple pieces of advice. The first thing I would advise would be to make writing an everyday thing. So give yourself an hour, 2 hours, just to devote to that writing. It can either be reading something, it can be trying to write something, taking a class. Just give yourself a little bit of time each day to work on that. The other thing I would recommend would be, if you're having trouble landing in a publication, whatever it might be, local, statewide, whatever, start a blog. Get into the rhythm of writing regularly. Get into the rhythm, of writing, of cultivating an audience, getting people into what you're doing. And the other thing you're asking me for one piece of advice. The other thing I would also advise would be to not to focus on being the first or the loudest. I think in this media culture, especially with sports writing, there's such an emphasis on those two things.
Yep.
And I think, and I've talked to a few journalism students who want to go that route. And my first thing, my advice, say, like, do not do that. Like, if you want to, yeah, that's fine. But like, focus on the things that aren't being done. There's a lot of stuff that's, look, there's for every Stephen A. Smith and Shams and Woj and whomever, there are double the number of places that need something, that need reporting, that need, that maybe need they're looking for a profile of an athlete that is off the beaten path, or maybe, there's if you focus too much on being the next Bob Costas or the next Mina Kimes or the next Miriam Fader, who are all great, you may lose out on something that's your niche.
Right.
That's good for you. So I think starting a blog, writing regularly, and using that blog as a base to pitch elsewhere, to meet other writers, to forge connections, I think that's a wonderful way to start, because it's a low pressure situation, and it'll get you used to, it'll give you a taste of what it is to write on a regular basis. So yeah, that's how I'd go about it.
That's a great answer. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
It's crazy to me because that's very good insight. But I started off doing a blog, and then I felt like for myself that my writing was getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, writing, it wasn't my gifted suit. So I was like, well, why should I spend the time and write it when I can just talk about it? And that's how my podcast was formed, essentially.
And that's great. And that's great because you should always have flexibility. You should always have, and again, that's great that you realize, like, look, this is not working. I have this blog and it is just, for whatever reason, so let me switch here. That's great. And I've done the same thing. I've changed course. Oh God, what time is it? Like, I've changed course, like I told you before, for the longest time, I wanted to be a movie reviewer. Like, that's what I wanted to do from the time I was 13 years old. I wanted to be the next Roger Ebert. I wanted to write these thoughtful, eloquent, 800-word reviews in major newspapers and get to the heart of film and the personal connections. And I did it for a long time. Like, I started off as a house on fire from, like, I'd say 1993 to like 2006. Then as time went on, I realized, like, A, I'm not getting any better at this. B, the opportunities to do this and get paid are either shrinking or non-existent.
Right. So
if I want to keep writing and getting better at this, I better find another topic, because, like, this is not, like, reviewing, I don't know, Get Over It and Anacondas 2, like, that is not helping my cause right now. So I've got to figure out a way to make to make this work. So with writing and with anything involving journalism, it's easier than you think to transition to something else, because it's all in the same pot. So for example, like Josh, you went from the blogging to the podcasting, and look, I mean, I transitioned from being more of trying to be an essayist and a critic to being more of a reporter. But it's all the same fun, like it's all the same germ. So, and that's the thing, like, someone starting off as a sports writer, they may not want to do that. They may be more interested in marketing or being in PR, or maybe working for a front office or whatever. Like you can't figure out what avenue you want to travel until you get in the car, turn the key, and go. And you just have to do that. And that's intimidating for a lot of people, but I think I'd rather be intimidated than wake up one day and realize, like, geez, I should have done that. And now it's too late.
Well, granted, that was a long time ago. And I've been in sort of like a podcast, call it sports media business, like up and coming for the past 3.5 years. And now I'm thinking about, oh man, I could do this podcast, and I have my website now. Why don't we start a blog along with this? So I'm like,
we've been talking about it. Let's do it.
Yeah, there's never a closed door. Yeah, that's great.
But then the thing for me is how I have to improve my writing, because once again, writing was not my strong suit, but just grinding, pushing, getting better and better. That's what it's all about. I think
the biggest thing for me, I think the best way I got better as a writer, well, there are two ways, and I'm still improving. I'm still getting better. And any writer who says, "Well, I'm great, I can't get any better," they're not good at it. They're just not, because like you should always want to be better. I think if you look at the best writers out there, or the best at any, look at LeBron James. Like he is. If you ask LeBron James, like, are you as good as you're going to be? He's going to say, no, of course not. Like, I can be better this, better teammate, better whatever.
Yeah.
What has helped me is just writing as much as I can, and just, kind of learning on the fly and getting the reps, but also reading. I mean, I'm always surprised at the number of writers who don't read as much as I think they should. Like, to me, if you're a writer, you're a reader. So like, and not just like, oh, sports books, or, oh, the thing that I'm interested in, but just every kind of, like, any kind of writing, like fiction. I mean, what a history, whatever. Like, I don't know, like the last 2 weeks, I've read Toni Morrison's Jazz. I read The Blind Side. I read Kate Fagan's memoir about her dad, which is excellent. I'm reading Last Exit of Brooklyn right now. Like, just read whatever you can get your hands on, and you'll always pick up something. Like, I truly believe that the more you read, the more you get better by osmosis. Yeah. And so, like, it may not seem like it at the time, like if you're reading whatever, but like it's seeping in, it's getting in there, and it may feel like a long slog when you're reading whatever, but it's, if you eventually be like, oh yeah, this looks familiar, and there's a tip I can use here, or here's a way to do this. And yeah, but I'm not saying reading should be homework. Like, I'm not saying you should have like a list, like the summer reading list, like I should read these things. I just think that as I've gotten older, I've gotten more curious about how great writers work, and also I'm also curious about the world around me. And I don't want to read, and as I've said before, I don't want to read books by people who look like me. So I want to read all different kinds of viewpoints and get an idea of how the world works and how I can approach the world, and as a person, and also, in this job that I have.
Absolutely. So
the best way to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pete, I mean, I'd love to wrap things up by getting your thoughts as the NBA season has tipped off and we're almost about a week in. I know you're an avid NBA watcher. What have you
Mm-hmm.
seen so far about the NBA season? And what are you looking out for to see in this 75th year of the NBA season?
Oh wow. I haven't watched as much as I'd like to, because life. But what I've seen, again, I'll preface my remarks by saying that to me, any NBA game, unless the two teams are putrid, is must watch TV, because it's always fun to watch something. It's always fun to see men and women with the WNBA like completely defy reality. Like it's just amazing to see athletes at the top of their game doing things that just aren't comprehensible. But with that being said, I really like Phoenix. I mean, I think Phoenix is able to keep their core together. The issue I have with Phoenix is more off the court, with Robert Sarver's problems coming to light, and also not signing Ayton to that contract. I think Ayton's a big part of that team. So I was surprised that the Suns couldn't get a deal done, because to me, like, when you have a 22-year-old double machine, you should sign that person like as soon as possible. So I think the Suns have a really good chance if Chris Paul can stay healthy and keep Father Time at bay another year. I think Utah, I liked Utah last year. I still think Utah's got a really good team. I think their bench is great. They have another year together, which is good. I think they have an owner that the players seem to like a lot, which goes a long way, which is the opposite of Phoenix. I know people are bullish on the Knicks. I remain to be convinced about that. I think between the ownership there and Tom Thibodeau's reputation of wearing out his welcome after a few seasons, I'm not sure if the formula is there for that, though it is nice to see New York relevant again in the basketball scene. But yeah, I'm curious. I'm really curious to see how the Lakers turn out.
I was about to say, yeah.
Because I think it's always amazing to me when you have like, because this is just a super team with like three guys, it's like a whole roster of just like hired guns brought on for a title run. And I'm curious to see, especially after the Dwight Howard, Anthony Davis brouhaha.
Yeah, I saw
a couple of days ago. Like, how is that going to work out? Like, how is Russell Westbrook? Is Russell Westbrook going to be a distributor on that team? I also like who's the young guy on that team? Because everyone on that team is like in their 30s and has tons of mileage on them. I'm really curious to see how that plays out. And I'm also curious to see what happens in New York in Brooklyn, I should say, with the Nets. Like, does Kyrie come back? If he doesn't come back, can the Nets contend? So yeah, I mean, and Philly. I mean, geez, look at Philadelphia. That's a whole soap opera. I have no idea what's going to play out over there. Like, I mean, Daryl Morey recently commented that, oh yeah, we can make this work. Like, really? You can make this work with the guy that doesn't want to be there, who is
doesn't want to make it work.
Doesn't want to make it work, and also, in all seriousness, has maybe some mental health issues that need to be addressed. Like, you're going to make it work with these disparate parts. I don't know. Those are the storylines that stand out to me. I'll be also interested to see if the Bucks can repeat. I don't know. I mean, that seemed like a lot of things went their way, but I'll be curious. What about you guys? What stands out to you as the season slogs on?
I think you covered it all, and I was going to bring up the Lakers. It's interesting. I think you described it perfectly. It's like it's not just a super team with like 2 or 3 players; they are completely loaded from top to bottom. But like you said, it's like guys who were in their prime, like 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a little worrisome too. It's going to be interesting to see how they're able to sort of space out minutes and how that works too, because that's another thing. Like, how is that all going to work?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's going to be some jealousy going on there for sure. So
yeah, I don't know how that I don't know how that works. And again, I mean, there isn't like everyone on that team is like in their 30s. I think it's the oldest roster in NBA history. If you look at average age. And I don't know, in a league where that's increasingly more about the transition game and huffing and puffing down the court,
Right.
I don't know how that's going to play. I mean, I love LeBron. I mean, he's a marvel, and he has found a way to adapt his game as time has gone on. But I don't know how you make that work. I mean, I that team could either win the title or like be out by May.
I
don't
agree.
I don't know if there's there's no middle ground here. But I don't know.
And I know, of course, Josh, would probably ask this too. Like the Wizards, they've had, they've been overhyped so far, and it's like, okay, we're 3 games into the season. Let's slow down a little bit.
Yeah,
let's
I'm like,
just
come
pump
on
the brakes.
now.
It's the Wizards after all.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, there's a long season. You're like, oh my gosh, the Wizards are 2-0. I do like the trade they made. I mean, Westbrook gave the Wizards so much, but to get all that in return from Los Angeles, I think that was a pretty good move looking at it now. But still, we're ranting over 2-0. Come on.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, this isn't the NFL. Like when you're 2-0 in the NFL, like that's a big like, hey, all right. Now it's an 82 game season. It's a long season. So let's pump the brakes and let's not get too wrapped up about this. I mean, also, I don't know. I mean, has Bradley Beal ever been? I don't know. Bradley Beal isn't a guy that I'm particularly like keen on in terms of being a big game guy. I mean, I don't know. There was a stat recently, and I'm trying to think where it came from, where like most of his points came like after, while the team was behind or something. I don't remember the exact
time.
Yeah, so like I don't know if Bradley Beal being the star of a playoff team is something that I want, but I don't know. I could be very much wrong about that.
I think the nice thing for them now is like they don't have, it's not Beal versus Westbrook now, because it kind of seemed, I mean, they didn't really have any altercations, but it seemed like there was some, I mean, obviously it's sports. That's just what happens. There's egos and all of that. So
I just, again,
it's kind of messy.
I love Westbrook. I love watching because you know what? I've said this before, but like watching Russell Westbrook play reminds me of like when I would go to the store to try on a new pair of shoes and felt that I could like fly and run faster and jump. He looks like those properties come true. Like he looks like he believes he can run faster, jump higher. He plays like a maniac. He's almost like like Iverson, where he's just so gritty and so in hyperdrive. But I don't know, but he's not a steadying presence. And I think the Wizards needed that. They needed a traditional point guard. And I think the Lakers kind of need that now. They need a guy that's going to just be happy distributing the ball. I think Harden can do that with the Nets. I think there's room for that there. I can't see Westbrook doing that in LA. But because I don't think it's worked anywhere else, has it? Like it didn't work in Houston, didn't work in Washington. Right.
We see what happened when John Wall went to Houston, and Houston's already looking to trade him. So
Houston's a disaster, and that's not John Wall's fault. I think
something about the city.
I don't know if it's the city. I'm trying to. What was it? Like, they just unloaded everybody, and then Daryl Morey left, and poor Steven Silas. Like he's just dealing with a really crappy hand, and it's not his fault. So. That's the thing. Like, I hope he gets another chance somewhere in a better environment, because like it just, he kind of was dealt a really, really bad hand. And from what I understand, like he was a really sought after candidate. He was, he coached everywhere. He was highly regarded by the media. So I don't know. I hope he gets a better shot, but like Houston's not it. I mean, that team is just so funny. Like 2 years ago, they were just, a title contender, and now they're just falling apart.
So Pete, I'd like to get your thoughts on the late Wes Unseld's son coaching the Washington Wizards. That must be very great to see a legacy father in Wes Unseld, who did very great things for the then Washington Bullets, to now Wes Unseld coaching the Washington Wizards, as in Wes Unseld Jr.
Well, I hope that Wes Unseld Jr. has a better coaching record than his dad did. I mean, that's the first thing. No, I mean, that kind of story, that's a great story. And I think those stories, I mean, that's one thing that I love about sports is that you have there's always these hot coaching candidates that come out either out of college or out of the G League or wherever, or the off the bench. And this is just like one of those situations that I think it's just a cool little story. And I'll be curious to see. What I'm curious to see is, will that have any effect on the roster? You know what I mean? Because like these players weren't born when Wes Unseld retired in 1980, 1981.
Yeah.
So I think from an historical standpoint, for basketball nerds like us, it's really cool. Like, oh wow, Wes Unseld's kid is coaching the Wizards. It's awesome. Like that's like what he must be going through, what he must be feeling. But I don't know if that has the same effect on the players that he's coaching.
Right.
That's something that I'm curious to know more about, because I don't know if that's a name that most of the players may not even know who Wes Unseld was, which I kind of just shows you just why you need to appreciate the history, because all this stuff led to where we are now. So
absolutely. Pete, I feel like you are a person we can talk to for 5-10 hours straight.
Just please, let's not. I have to go to bed. I'm an old man.
I mean, just so much knowledge, so much fun.
Much fun, yeah.
Oh, this is a blast, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, as we unfortunately have to wrap up this interview, but I mean, this man right here, you can go on and like hypothetically, we could carry on for like 5-10 hours. I feel like that's how well the
definitely have him on again.
Was.
I'm not speaking for everyone, but I think we should have him on again.
If you want to have me back on, I'd love to. I'd love to make a return appearance.
Absolutely.
Not to plug the book. No, yeah. I mean, this is the fun part about doing these podcasts and these radio shows, is that 95% of the time, the people who are interviewing me are folks that I would hang out with if I were at a bar, at a party, wherever, like just talking sports. Like it's, there's a nice swath of sports nerdom out there. Yeah. And it's nice. It's not, for years I kind of felt I was the only one, and this book has sort of been like a nice little introductory tour. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm thrilled that I was able to be part of this for a bit.
Absolutely, Pete. So once again, Pete Croatto, the author of From Hangtime to Primetime. Pete, plug the book one last time and tell our listeners, watchers, where they can purchase a copy of this book, From Hangtime to Primetime.
Gladly. You can get the book pretty much at any brick and mortar or online retailer. If you can buy the book from your online book from an independent bookstore, that's always preferable, because local businesses are the backbone of the nation. And my local bookstore here, Odyssey Bookstore in Ithaca, has been a wonderful partner. In fact, if you go to odysseybookstore.com, ODYSSEY bookstore.com, you can order an autographed copy of the book, and the store will mail it for an additional $5. So you can either email the store or call them. They're very friendly. They're terrific. It's a wonderful, cozy little bookstore that I can spend hours in, and I bought many books there. It's a delight to partner with them. If you don't want an autographed copy, if you don't want to see my childish scrawl defacing your book, that's okay. I'm happy to send a signed book plate free of charge. I'll mail that anywhere. I've mailed them to, Wales, Italy, I think Spain popped up at one point.
Oh, no kidding.
I'll mail the signed book plate anywhere. And of course, if you can't afford the book, if times are tight, I completely understand. Your local library should have it. If not, order a copy. I'm sure they will stock it. Yeah, that's pretty much I think that covers everything in terms of the book's availability.
Absolutely. So you can follow Pete on Twitter, also at Pete Croatto, if you want to find him there and connect with him. But Pete, it's been amazing. It's been a lot of fun. We greatly appreciate it, my man.
Guys, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And best of luck going forward. This was great.
So once again, thanks to Trumbull Insurance Agency. Contact Patrick Van Kemper for all your insurance needs. 540-532-0622 or Patrick at TrumbleAgency.com. For our sponsors, Regroup Building Services, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation, and Mark Francis with Icon Real Estate. This has been another production of the Kirby on Sports podcast on YouTube. Like, share, comment, subscribe. You can check out all of our work as well, www.kirbyonsports.com. Until the next time you see us, always remember to create greatness. So long and peace out.